In a quiet corner of Cleveland, tucked between rows of brick houses with peeling paint and front yards that held more weeds than flowers, lived a girl who spoke mostly through music. She wasn't loud. She didn't raise her hand in class unless the teacher called on her directly. At lunch, she sat near the window watching clouds drift across the sky while other kids laughed and shouted over slices of pizza. Most people didn't notice her, and that was just how she liked it. Her house was small, with creaky floorboards and a kitchen that always smelled faintly of cinnamon and old coffee. Money was tight and had been for as long as she could remember. Her mom worked double shifts at a hospital downtown, coming home with tired eyes and shoes that squeaked from being worn too long. There wasn't much left over for extras. No fancy clothes, no new gadgets, and certainly no music lessons. But what they did have was something far more precious, an old upright piano that had belonged to her grandmother. It stood in the living room like a silent guest who'd never left. The wood was scratched, one of the pedals stuck halfway down, and a few keys were yellowed with age. To most, it looked like junk, but to her it was a doorway. She'd first touched it when she was 6. Her grandmother had just passed away, and the piano had been moved in from the old house during a rainy afternoon. While adults talked in hushed voices in the kitchen, she wandered over, drawn by the way the dust motes danced in the sunlight around it. She pressed a key, just one, and the soft, warm note filled the room like a sigh. From that moment she was hooked. No one taught her how to play. There were no YouTube tutorials on their slow internet. No books about chords or scales, but she had something else. Ears that listened like they were hungry. Every evening after homework, she'd sit on the worn bench and press keys, trying to copy the sounds she heard in her head. Sometimes it was a lullaby her grandmother used to hum. Other times it was the melody from a commercial or the jingle of an ice cream truck. She'd fumble, get frustrated, walk away, but always come back. By the time she turned 10, she could play whole songs by ear. Not perfectly, maybe, but with a feeling that made her mom pause in the doorway sometimes, wiping her hands on her apron, eyes glistening. "You got her gift," her mom would whisper, though she never said it loud enough for the girl to hear. School was another world entirely. There, she was just another face in the crowd. Quiet, average grades, never picked for teams. Teachers sometimes forgot her name. Kids didn't bully her exactly, but they didn't include her either. She was like background noise, always there, never really noticed. In gym class, she'd hang back near the bleachers. In group projects, she'd do her part without saying much. She didn't mind, not really. She'd learned early that silence could be a kind of armor. But inside, her mind was anything but quiet. It buzzed with rhythms, harmonies, questions about why certain notes made her feel like crying or flying. She'd lie in bed at night, listening to the distant hum of traffic or the wind rattling the window pane, and imagine how she'd turn those sounds into music. Rain on the roof? That was a soft staccato. A dog barking 3 streets over? A sharp, sudden accent in an otherwise calm phrase. The world to her was already a symphony. She just needed to learn how to write it down. One Saturday, while cleaning out the attic, her mom found a box of her grandmother's old records. Most were scratched beyond saving, but one classical album still played. It was a collection of piano pieces, Beethoven, Liszt, Chopin. They put it on the old record player, and the first notes filled the house like a secret being whispered. The girl stood frozen in the hallway, heart pounding. She'd never heard anything like it. The music wasn't just pretty, it was alive. It soared, it wept, it danced in the dark. That night she stayed up until 2 a.m., trying to mimic the opening of a Chopin nocturne on the piano, her fingers clumsy but determined. She didn't know the names of the notes. She didn't understand time signatures or dynamics, but she felt the music in her bones. And that was enough for now. At school, music class was basic. They sang folk songs, clapped rhythms, and once a year everyone got to try the keyboard for 10 minutes. When her turn came, she sat down and played a simple version of Ode to Joy from memory. The teacher raised an eyebrow. "Did you take lessons?" she asked. The girl shook her head. The teacher smiled politely but didn't press further. Later she told the class, "Some people just have a natural ear." The words sounded nice, but they didn't change anything. The girl went back to being invisible. Still, she kept playing. Rain or shine, tired or wide awake, she'd sit at that old piano. Some days nothing came out right. Her fingers would trip over each other. The notes would sound flat or muddy, and she'd slam the fallboard shut in frustration. But other days, rare, magical days, everything clicked. Her hands moved like they knew the way, and the music poured out like water from a spring. On those nights, she'd forget about homework, about the leaky faucet, about the fact that her shoes were starting to split at the sole. For a little while, she wasn't just a quiet girl in a worn-out sweater. She was someone who could make beauty out of silence. Her mom noticed the change, even if she couldn't explain it. The girl seemed calmer, more centered. She stopped biting her nails. She started humming while doing chores. Once, when her mom came home exhausted after a double shift, she found the girl playing a gentle, made-up melody, soft and slow, like a lullaby for grown-ups. She stood in the doorway and cried quietly, not because she was sad, but because she finally understood. This piano wasn't just an old piece of furniture. It was her daughter's voice. No one expected much from her. Not the teachers, not the neighbors, not even her own family. Not in the way people usually measure success. She wasn't going to be a star athlete or a science fair winner, but deep down, in a place she rarely let anyone see, she dreamed of something simple yet enormous. To play in front of people who would really listen. Not just hear but feel what she was trying to say. She didn't know it yet, but that chance was coming sooner than she thought. For now, though, it was just her and the piano, late at night, in a house that creaked with memories. Outside, the city slept. Inside, a quiet girl was learning how to speak without saying a word. And every note she played was a step toward a moment that would change everything. Not because she wanted fame, but because she finally had something true to share. The piano keys, worn smooth by her grandmother's hands and now by hers, held more than music. They held hope. And hope, even when it's quiet, has a way of making noise when the time is right. The school year had settled into its usual rhythm. Morning bells, shuffling backpacks, the smell of chalk dust and cafeteria pizza. For most kids, the highlight of spring was the upcoming field day, or the last day of school. But this year, something different was being whispered in the hallways. The annual talent show was coming back after a 2-year break. Posters went up on every bulletin board, bright with glitter and bold letters. "Show us what you've got." Teachers encouraged students to sign up. There'd be dancing, singing, magic tricks, even someone who could solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded. The gym would be packed. Parents would come. Maybe even the local newspaper would send someone. In music class, the teacher, a kind woman with silver-streaked hair and a voice that always sounded like she'd just finished laughing, stood in front of the room holding a clipboard. "I know some of you are shy," she said, glancing around. "But talent isn't just about being flashy. It's about sharing something real." Her eyes landed just for a second on the quiet girl in the back row. Even if it's just a simple song. The girl looked down at her hands. She hadn't thought about signing up. The idea of standing in front of everyone under bright lights with all those eyes watching. It made her stomach twist. She liked playing for the walls, for the moon through her window, for her mom when she thought no one else was listening. But a crowd? No. That felt like stepping onto a tightrope with no net. Still, that night she couldn't stop thinking about it. She sat at the piano longer than usual, fingers resting on the keys without pressing down. What if? The thought was small, almost shy itself. What if she tried? She knew she couldn't do anything too fancy. Not that she thought she was fancy. But if she played something complicated, people might expect her to be trained or professional, and she wasn't either. She didn't even know how to read sheet music properly. She'd tried once with a library book, but the symbols swam on the page like ants marching in the wrong direction. So she decided she'd play something simple. Something everyone knew. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. It was safe, friendly. No one would be surprised and no one would be disappointed. It felt like the right choice. Humble, honest, and within her reach. The next day, she slipped her name onto the sign-up sheet during lunch, heart pounding like she'd just run a mile. She wrote only her first initial and last name. No description. Just piano. A few days later, the music teacher pulled her aside after class. "I saw your name on the list," she said gently. "That's wonderful!" "I'm so glad you're joining us," she smiled. "Don't worry about making it perfect. Just play something sweet, maybe Twinkle or Mary Had a Little Lamb. Something easy so you don't get nervous." The girl nodded. She didn't correct her. It felt easier to let the teacher believe what she wanted to believe. Besides, maybe it was better this way. Lower expectations meant less pressure. She could slip on and off the stage like a shadow, unnoticed but present, just like always. But that night something strange happened. She sat down to practice Twinkle, but her fingers wouldn't obey. They kept drifting to other keys, forming chords she'd heard in her head for weeks. She'd been listening again to that old classical record, especially one piece that made her feel like she was standing on a cliff at sunrise, wind in her hair, heart wide open. It was fast, then slow, then fast again, full of longing and joy tangled together. She didn't know its name at first, only that it lived inside her now. She looked it up on the library computer during study hall. Fantaisie Impromptu by Frédéric Chopin. The title sounded like poetry. She watched a video of a pianist playing it, hands flying, eyes closed, totally lost in the music. The notes tumbled like water over rocks, sparkling and urgent. She listened 3 times in a row, headphones pressed tight to her ears as if trying to absorb it through her skin. Back home, she tried to copy it. At first, it was impossible. Her left hand fumbled the rolling bass line. Her right hand tripped over the fast runs. She'd stop, frustrated, and go back to Twinkle. But the Chopin piece wouldn't leave her alone. It echoed in her dreams. She'd wake up humming parts of it. She started practicing it in secret, only after her mom went to bed, only with the windows closed, only when the house was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. She told no one. Not even her mom. She was afraid someone would say, "That's too hard for you," or "You're not ready," or worse, "Why bother?" So she kept it hidden like a treasure buried in the backyard. Every night she dug a little deeper. Weeks passed. The talent show was now just 10 days away. During school hours she acted normal, quiet, focused, invisible. But at night she became someone else. Someone bold. Someone who dared to reach for music that wasn't meant for beginners. She slowed the recording down on the library computer, writing down patterns in a notebook with a pencil. She practiced one measure for an hour, until her fingers stopped shaking. She learned to breathe through the hard parts instead of stopping. She still planned to play Twinkle at the show. She told herself that every night. But deep down, a quiet rebellion was growing. What if just this once? She played what her heart really wanted to say. The weekend before the show, her mom came home early. She found the girl at the piano, eyes closed, playing a fast, swirling passage from the Chopin piece, messy, uneven, but full of fire. She stopped when she heard the door click. Her mom stood in the hallway, arms full of grocery bags frozen. "Was that Chopin?" she asked softly. The girl nodded, cheeks burning. "I know I should play something simple," she mumbled. For the show, her mom set the bags down and walked over. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she sat beside her on the bench. "You've been practicing that in secret?" "Yeah, why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't want you to think I was being silly. It's too hard. I'll probably mess it up." Her mom was quiet. Then she said, "You know what your grandmother used to say? If a song lives in your chest, you owe it to the world to let it out, even if your voice shakes." She smiled. She played that same piece at her first recital. She was 15. She forgot half the notes. But people still cried. The girl looked at her hands. "I'm scared." "I know," her mom said. "But being scared doesn't mean you shouldn't try." That night, for the first time, she practiced out loud, with the lights on, the windows open, no hiding. Her mom sat on the couch with a cup of tea, listening. She didn't clap or cheer. She just listened, and that was enough. The day before the talent show, the music teacher handed out the final performance order. The girl's name was near the end. Good, she thought. Less waiting, less time to panic. The teacher patted her shoulder. "Remember, just keep it simple. A nice little tune. You'll do great." She nodded again. Still didn't correct her. Back home, she ran through Twinkle once just to keep up appearances. Then she played the Chopin piece from start to finish 3 times. The third time, something clicked. The left hand found its rhythm. The right hand flew without stumbling. For a few minutes, she wasn't in her living room anymore. She was somewhere else, somewhere where music was the only language and she spoke it fluently. She stopped, breathless. Her heart was racing, but not from fear, from excitement, from the quiet certainty that this was what she was meant to share. She didn't sleep much that night. Not because she was nervous, but because she kept replaying the music in her head, polishing each phrase like a stone in a river. She imagined walking onto the stage, sitting at the piano and letting go. No pretending, no hiding, just truth in notes. The morning of the talent show, the school buzzed with energy. Kids wore glitter, practiced dance moves in the halls, argued over who got to use the good microphone. The girl wore her best dress, a hand-me-down from a cousin, navy blue with tiny white flowers. It was a little big, but her mom had pinned it neatly at the shoulders. She carried no sheet music. She didn't need it. The piece was in her bones now. At lunch, someone asked what she was going to play. Just a little song, she said, and left it at that. As the afternoon wore on, her stomach tightened. She watched the other acts rehearse. Jokes, cartwheels, a boy rapping about his dog. Everyone seemed so confident, so sure of themselves. She felt small again, like she might disappear if she didn't hold on tight. But then she remembered her grandmother's piano. The way the middle C key stuck a little. The smell of lemon polish her mom used every Sunday. The nights she'd played until her fingers ached, just because the music wouldn't let her stop. This wasn't about being perfect. It was about being honest. When the final bell rang, students rushed to the gym to set up. The stage was bare except for a single piano. School-owned, slightly out of tune, but good enough. She walked over and pressed a key. It sounded thin but clear. She took a deep breath. Backstage waiting, she heard the crowd start to gather. Laughter, chairs scraping, a baby crying, normal sounds, human sounds. She closed her eyes and thought of the first note of the Chopin piece, the one that felt like stepping off a ledge into the sky. She still hadn't told anyone what she was really going to play. Not the teacher, not her mom, though she suspected, not even herself, not out loud, but in her heart, the decision had been made weeks ago. Now all she had to do was begin. The gym smelled like popcorn, floor wax, and nervous sweat. Folding chairs were lined up in uneven rows, already filling with parents in jeans and teachers in cardigans, some holding coffee cups, others scrolling on their phones. A few younger siblings ran between the seats until someone called them back. The stage lights, borrowed from the high school drama club, cast long, warm pools on the wooden floor. Backstage, tucked behind a heavy red curtain that smelled faintly of dust and old fabric, the girl stood with her hands clasped tightly together, trying to slow her breathing. She'd watched the show unfold from the wings, heart thumping in time with every act. A boy did a series of backflips that earned whistles and claps. Two girls sang a pop song with matching choreography, their voices bright and confident. Someone juggled tennis balls while balancing on one foot. Each performer walked off grinning, flushed with pride, greeted by friends who hugged them like heroes. She felt happy for them, but also smaller, like she was holding her breath underwater waiting for air. Her turn was next. The music teacher gave her a quick thumbs up from the side of the stage. "You've got this," she mouthed, still thinking the girl would play something sweet and simple. Maybe a nursery rhyme with a few extra flourishes. The girl nodded but didn't smile. She couldn't. Her throat felt tight, like someone had tied a gentle knot just below her chin. Then her name was called. A ripple of polite applause moved through the crowd, mostly parents clapping because they knew they should, not because they expected anything special. She walked out slowly, eyes fixed on the piano. Her shoes made soft clicks on the stage floor. She could feel dozens of eyes on her back, but she didn't look up. Not yet. She reached the bench, sat down, and smoothed her dress. The piano keys looked different under the stage lights, whiter, sharper, almost alive. She placed her hands in her lap for a moment, palms up, as if offering them to the silence. Then she lifted them, hovered over the keys, and paused. This was the moment. She could still change her mind. Play Twinkle, keep it safe. Walk off quietly like she always did. But then she thought of her grandmother's hands, wrinkled, strong, always moving when she played. She thought of those late nights when the house was dark, and the only sound was the piano singing back to her. She thought of how the Chopin piece had lived inside her for weeks, not as a performance, but as a feeling she couldn't name until now. She took one deep breath and began. The first notes weren't loud. They were soft, questioning, like a whisper in an empty room, but they were clear, and they were hers. From the very first measure, the room changed. People stopped shifting in their seats. A baby stopped crying. Someone near the front lowered their phone. The music teacher, standing just off stage, froze mid-step. Her eyes widened. She knew that piece. Everyone who knew classical music knew that piece. And this wasn't a recording. This was a 12-year-old girl, quiet, unassuming, the one who never raised her hand. playing Chopin's Fantaisie Impromptu like she'd been born to it. The left hand rolled out a deep, rippling pattern, steady, urgent, like a river pulling you forward. The right hand danced above it fast and light, notes tumbling over each other like sparks from a fire. It wasn't perfect. A few notes were rushed. One chord came in a hair too early. But none of that mattered. Because what filled the gym wasn't just technique, it was emotion. It was longing. It was joy breaking through sadness. It was the sound of someone finally speaking after years of silence. Halfway through, she forgot the audience existed. Her shoulders relaxed. Her head tilted slightly, eyes closed. Her fingers moved with a kind of quiet certainty, as if they'd done this 1,000 times before, and in a way they had, not on this stage, but in the dark, in the quiet, in the space between heartbeats where real music is born. In the third section, when the tempo slowed and the melody turned tender, a woman in the third row wiped her eyes without realizing she was doing it. A man near the back sat up straighter, his arms uncrossed for the first time all night. Even the kids, usually fidgeting or whispering, were still, watching, listening like they'd never listened before. Backstage, the music teacher pressed a hand to her mouth. She'd taught for 23 years. She'd heard hundreds of student recitals. But this was different. This wasn't just talent. This was truth. The final pages of the piece built again, faster, fiercer, full of fire. Her hands flew but never lost control. Every note had purpose. Every silence between them meant something. And then the last chord, soft, lingering like a sigh after a long journey. She lifted her hands. Silence. For one heartbeat. Then two. Then the room exploded, not polite applause. Not the kind you give because you feel you should. This was real, loud, sudden, full of awe. People stood up. Someone shouted, "Bravo!" A little girl near the front clapped so hard her hands turned red. Teachers turned to each other with wide eyes, mouths forming silent wows. She opened her eyes, startled. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected anything, really. She just played what she needed to play. She stood slowly, legs a little shaky, and gave a small bow. Just a nod of her head, really. Then she walked off stage, heart pounding, not from fear now, but from something new. Relief. Like she'd carried a heavy secret for years, and finally set it down in front of everyone. Back in the wings, the music teacher pulled her into a hug. "I had no idea," she whispered, voice thick. "None." The girl just nodded, unable to speak. Her mom was waiting just outside the gym doors, having slipped in during the last act. She didn't say anything at first. She just looked at her daughter. Really looked. And then pulled her close. No words were needed. The hug said it all. "I heard you. I see you now." Back inside, the show went on. Someone did a magic trick with a deck of cards. A group recited a poem about friendship. But the energy had shifted. People kept glancing toward the piano, as if it might start playing on its own again. Conversations buzzed with questions. Who was that? Has she been taking lessons? Did you see her hands? She's only 12. One man in the audience happened to be a reporter for the local paper. He'd come to cover the talent show as a light human interest piece, something cheerful for the weekend edition. But now he was scribbling notes furiously in his notebook, already drafting the headline in his head. Quiet student stuns crowd with classical masterpiece. Later that night, long after the chairs were stacked and the lights turned off, the girl sat on her bed, still in her dress, staring at the wall. Her fingers tingled, as if they still held the echo of the music. She replayed the moment in her mind. The silence before she began, the way the notes felt under her skin, the sound of real applause. Not just polite clapping. For the first time, she didn't feel invisible. She felt known. Not because she'd done something flashy or loud, but because she'd shared something honest, something that came from deep inside, not from a script or a trend or what someone told her to do. Downstairs, her mom was on the phone with her sister, voice low but excited. "You should have heard her," she said. It was like Grandma was playing through her. The girl smiled a little, then lay back on her pillow. Outside, the streetlights hummed. A car passed slowly. The world kept turning, but something inside her had changed. She wasn't just the quiet girl anymore. She was the one who played the piano. And when she did, people stopped to listen. And that, she realized as she drifted off to sleep, was more than enough. The next morning, Everything felt the same, and yet completely different. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window just like always. The coffee pot gurgled. The neighbor's dog barked at a passing mail truck. But when the girl walked into school, heads turned. Not in a mean way, not like she'd done something wrong, but with curiosity, with respect, like they were seeing her for the first time. A boy she'd shared a science lab table with all year gave her a shy thumbs up in the hallway. A teacher she barely knew stopped her to say, "That was beautiful, truly." Even the lunch lady handed her an extra cookie and whispered, "Keep playing, honey." She didn't know how to respond. She wasn't used to attention. For so long, being unnoticed had been her shield. Now that shield was gone and she wasn't sure what to wear instead. At home, things started changing too. Her mom came back from work with a small envelope in her hand. "This came for you," she said, smiling. Inside was a handwritten note from the director of a local music school. They'd heard about her performance. Someone had told someone who knew someone, and they were offering a free trial lesson. No strings. Just a chance to see if she'd like to learn more. She read the note 3 times, fingers tracing the elegant handwriting. It felt like a door had cracked open just a little. Then 2 days later, her mom showed her something on her phone. A short video, shot on someone's phone from the back of the gym, had been posted online. It wasn't high quality. The lighting was dim, and you could hear chairs squeaking in the background. But the piano came through clear. And the comments. There were hundreds of them. "Who is this kid? Chopin at 12? Unreal. My daughter cried watching this. Please tell me she's getting proper lessons now." Her mom scrolled slowly, eyes wide. "It's been shared over 10,000 times," she said softly. The girl didn't know what to feel. Part of her was proud. Another part wanted to disappear. What if people expected more now? What if she couldn't live up to it? But then an email arrived. Then another. A community center invited her to play at their spring fundraiser. A local radio station asked if she'd come in for a short interview. And then, the biggest surprise of all, a message from a music conservatory 2 states away. They'd seen the video too. They offered her a full scholarship audition. All expenses paid. Just come play for them. Her mom read the email out loud at the kitchen table, voice trembling a little. "They want to hear you in person," she said, looking up. "They think you have real potential." The girl stared at her hands. They looked the same, slightly chapped from winter, nails bitten short. But now they carried a new weight. People believed in them. She said yes to the trial lesson. The music school was in an old brick building downtown, with tall windows and a grand piano in the lobby that gleamed under soft lights. The teacher, a woman with kind eyes and silver hair pulled into a loose bun, didn't ask her to play right away. Instead, she sat with her on a bench and asked, "Why do you play?" The girl thought for a long time. "Because it's the only time I feel like I'm saying exactly what I mean," she finally said. The teacher nodded, as if that was the only answer she needed. That first lesson wasn't about fixing mistakes or drilling scales. It was about listening, really listening to the music inside her. The teacher showed her how to read the sheet music for the Chopin piece she'd played by ear. She explained the markings, agitato, dolce tu con fuoco. "These aren't just instructions," she said. "They're emotions written in code." For the first time, the girl understood that music wasn't just notes. It was a language, and she was finally learning how to speak it properly. She started going every Saturday. Her mom waited in the lobby with a book, but sometimes she'd sit quietly in the back of the room just listening. After each lesson, the girl would come out with new pages of music, new ideas, new ways to shape a phrase. She practiced more than ever, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Every note felt like a discovery. At school, things kept shifting. She still sat by the window at lunch, but now other kids sometimes joined her, not to talk much, but just to sit in comfortable quiet. A girl from her math class asked if she'd help her learn a simple song for her little brother's birthday. She said yes and spent a lunch period showing her how to play Happy Birthday with 2 hands. It felt good to share what she knew. She also started speaking up in class. Not a lot, but when the teacher asked a question and she knew the answer, she raised her hand. The first time, her voice shook, but no one laughed. They just listened, like they had listened to her music. Her confidence didn't come all at once. It grew slowly like a plant pushing through concrete. Some days she still felt small. Some days she worried she'd been a fluke, that the talent show was a one-time thing, and soon everyone would realize she wasn't special after all. But then she'd sit at the piano and the doubt would melt away, because the music never lied. And she played, she knew deep in her bones that this was where she belonged. One afternoon, the music teacher from school pulled her aside. "There's a city arts council meeting next week," she said. "They're talking about cutting funding for school music programs. I'd like you to come and play. Just a short piece. Maybe the Chopin again or something new." The girl hesitated. "What if they don't care?" "They'll care," the teacher said firmly. "Because you're not just playing for them. You're playing for every kid who's ever been told music isn't important," she agreed. The night before the meeting, she couldn't sleep. She practiced until midnight, then lay in bed listening to the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. She thought about all the kids who'd never get to touch a piano because their school didn't have one. She thought about how close she'd come to never learning herself. At the meeting, the room was full of adults in suits, talking about budgets and numbers. She sat in the back, hands folded in her lap, until it was her turn. She walked to the small upright piano they'd brought in. Nowhere near as nice as the one at the conservatory, but it would do. She didn't play Chopin this time. She played a piece she'd started writing herself. Simple, slow, with a melody that rose like a question and fell like an answer. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. When she finished, the room was quiet for a long moment. Then one person clapped. Then another. Soon the whole room was applauding, not politely but with feeling. Afterward, a woman in a navy blazer came up to her. "Thank you," she said. "You reminded us why we do this." She handed her a card. "If you ever need anything, lessons, an instrument, a place to practice, call me." That night, her mom made pancakes for dinner, even though it wasn't the weekend. "You did good," she said, flipping one with a smile. "Real good," the girl nodded, syrup dripping from her fork. She didn't feel like a star. She didn't feel famous. She just felt seen, and that was enough. Over the next few weeks, more opportunities came. A local church asked her to play during their Easter service. A nursing home invited her to perform for their residents. Each time she said yes, not for the attention, but because she'd learned something important. Music wasn't just for her. It was for everyone who needed to feel something. She also started teaching. Just one student at first. A shy 8-year-old from down the street whose parents couldn't afford lessons. They met in the girls' living room, on the old piano with the sticky pedal. She showed the younger girl how to find middle C, how to count beats, how to listen to the silence between notes. It felt strange at first, being the one who knew something. But it also felt right, like she was passing on a gift she'd been given, even if she hadn't known it at the time. One rainy afternoon, as they practiced together, the little girl looked up and said, "Do you think I'll ever play like you?" The girl paused. "You'll play like you," she said. "And that's even better." She meant it because she'd finally understood music wasn't about being the best. It was about being true. And when you're true, people listen. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. Her hands still weren't fancy. Her shoes still had scuffs. Her house still creaked in the wind. But now when she walked down the hall at school, she didn't look at the floor. She looked ahead. And when she played, she didn't hide. She shared. And that, more than any applause, more than any scholarship or video, was the real masterpiece. A year had passed since that night in the school gym. The seasons had turned. Spring blossoms gave way to summer heat, then autumn leaves, then winter snow. And with them, the girl had changed too. She still lived in the same house, still drank the same slightly burnt coffee with her mom on Sunday mornings, still wore hand-me-down sweaters that were a little too big. But something inside her had settled, like a song finally finding its key. She wasn't the same quiet kid who hid behind silence. She spoke now, not loudly, not for attention, but clearly with purpose. She looked people in the eye when she talked. She laughed more. And when she played the piano, it wasn't just to escape anymore. It was to connect. The city had taken notice too. After the school board meeting where she'd played her own little piece, something shifted. Funding for music programs wasn't just restored, it was expanded. New keyboards arrived at her school. A retired musician volunteered to teach after-school lessons. And, best of all, the district launched a new initiative called Keys for Every Child, offering free instrument access and beginner classes to students in neighborhoods where music had long been seen as a luxury, not a necessity. She'd been asked to help design it. Not as a performer, but as someone who'd lived it. She sat in on planning meetings, her notebook filled with ideas. Start with songs kids already know, she'd written. Let them play before they read. Make it fun, not scary. The adults listened. They even took notes. Now on a cool spring evening, she stood backstage at the city's annual Youth Arts Gala. A real theater this time, with velvet seats, a proper stage, and a grand piano that shone like black glass under the lights. She wasn't nervous. Not like before. She was calm, focused, ready. This time she knew exactly what she was going to play, the same Chopin piece that had changed everything. But she wouldn't just perform it. She'd speak first. When her name was called, she walked out to warm applause. The audience was full. Parents, teachers, city officials, kids from the new music program, even a few reporters. She sat at the piano, adjusted the bench, and then stood back up. She took a breath. "Hi," she said, her voice steady, carrying easily in the quiet hall. "A year ago, I played this piece at my middle school talent show. I was scared. I thought no one would care. But you did, and that changed my life." She paused, looking out at the crowd. "I used to think music was something you had to be born with, like a gift only special people got. But I was wrong. Music isn't about being special. It's about being human. Everyone has a song inside them. Some just haven't had the chance to hear it yet." She glanced toward the front row, where a group of kids from the new program sat, some holding beginner recorders, others clutching sheet music with bright stickers on the corners. "That's why I'm so glad our schools are finally saying every kid deserves a chance to try." She sat back down. "This piece, it's not mine. It was written almost 200 years ago. But tonight I'm playing it for all the kids who've been told they're too quiet, too ordinary, or not good enough. Because sometimes the quietest voices have the most to say." Then she began. The opening notes floated out, soft, searching, full of memory. But this time they weren't just notes. They were a story. The story of a girl who listened to the world and answered back in music. The story of late nights, worn piano keys, and a grandmother's love passed down through melody. The story of a community that chose to believe in something beautiful. Her playing was stronger now. Not just technically, though her fingers moved with more control, her phrasing more intentional, but emotionally. She wasn't just playing Chopin. She was having a conversation with him, with her grandmother, with every kid in that audience who'd ever felt invisible. When she reached the fast, swirling middle section, the energy in the room lifted. People leaned forward. You could hear a pin drop, and in the tender, slow part that followed, a few people wiped their eyes, not because they were sad, but because they recognized something true. As the final chords faded into silence, the applause didn't just come, it rose like a wave. People stood, not out of politeness but out of gratitude, because they hadn't just heard a performance, they'd witnessed a promise kept. That talent, when given room to grow, can bloom in the most unexpected places. Afterward, she didn't rush off stage. She stayed to talk to the kids from the music program. One little boy, no older than 7, tugged her sleeve. "Can I touch the piano?" he asked, eyes wide. "Of course," she said, stepping aside. He pressed one key gently, then grinned. "It sounds like magic," she smiled. "It is. But the real magic isn't in the piano. It's in you." Later, as she walked out of the theater with her mom, the night air cool on her face, she felt a deep kind of peace. Not the peace of being done, but the peace of being exactly where she was meant to be. Over the next few months, her life settled into a new rhythm. She still went to school, still did her homework, still argued with her mom about laundry. But now, after school, she often went to the community center to help with the beginner piano class. She didn't call herself a teacher. She called herself a music friend. She showed kids how to find their first notes, how to count beats with their feet, how to make mistakes and keep going. One afternoon, a girl who barely spoke in class played a simple melody all the way through without stopping. When she finished, she looked up at the girl with shining eyes and whispered, "I did it." "Yes," the girl said, "you did." And in that moment, she saw herself a year ago, nervous, hopeful, waiting for someone to notice the music inside her. Now, she was the one noticing. She also kept learning. Her Saturday lessons continued, and she'd been accepted into a summer program at the conservatory, the same one that had reached out after the talent show. She'd be studying with real pianists, learning music theory, even trying her hand at composing longer pieces. It was exciting, but not overwhelming, because now she knew. Music wasn't about becoming famous, it was about becoming yourself. Her mom started a small fund with help from neighbors and local businesses to fix up the old piano at home. A technician came, tuned it, replaced the broken pedal, even polished the wood until it gleamed like it had in her grandmother's living room. "It deserves to be heard," the technician said as he packed up his tools. And it was. Nearly every evening someone was playing it, sometimes the girl, sometimes one of the kids from the program who came over to practice. The house once, quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator, now echoed with scales, simple songs, and the occasional burst of laughter when someone hit a wrong note and turned it into a joke. One Saturday, the girl sat down to write a new piece of her own. Not for a show, not for anyone else, just for her. She started with a single note, middle C, and let her hands wander. The melody that came out was slow, gentle, with a hint of sadness but also hope. She didn't give it a name right away. She just played it over and over until it felt like home. Later she played it for her mom. "That sounds like Grandma's porch," her mom said softly, eyes closed. "Like summer evenings and fireflies," the girl smiled. "Then I'll call it Porch Light." That small piece would later be included in a local youth composer showcase. But she didn't care about that part. She cared that it meant something real. As the school year ended, the Keys for Every Child program celebrated its first anniversary. They held a recital in the school gym, the same one where it all began. This time the stage held not just one piano, but 3. Kids played everything from hot cross buns to simplified Beethoven. Some forgot their notes, some played too fast. But every single one of them finished with their heads held high. The girl played last. Not Chopin this time. She played Porch Light. And when she finished, the room didn't erupt in wild applause. It filled with something quieter, deeper, a shared understanding. That music wasn't about perfection. It was about courage, about showing up even when you're scared, about letting your heart speak when words fall short. After the recital, a parent came up to her. "My son never wanted to try anything before," they said. "Now he practices every day. You gave him that." She shook her head. "I didn't give it to him. I just reminded him it was already there." That was the truth she'd learned most of all. No one gives you your voice. You already have it. Sometimes you just need someone to hand you the keys and the courage to press down. Now, when she walked through the halls at school, kids didn't just look at her. They smiled. Some asked for tips. Others just said, "Keep playing." And she did. Not for fame, not for praise, but because music had become her way of saying thank you to her grandmother, to her mom, to the teacher who believed in her, to the community that chose to listen. And every time she sat at a piano, whether it was the grand one in the theater or the old upright at home, she remembered that night in the gym, the silence before the first note, the way the world held its breath, the moment she stopped hiding and started sharing. She wasn't a prodigy, she wasn't a star, she was just a girl who loved music and who finally learned that loving something deeply is enough. And if you ever pass by her neighborhood in the evening, you might hear it, the soft sound of piano drifting through an open window. Not flashy, not loud, just true. And if you stop to listen, you might just hear your own heart answering back.